At the trial, my parents froze when I walked into the courtroom. My brother screamed. The judge went pale, whispering, "My God, is that really her?" Every eye turned to me. Then I handed the judge and everything turned to chaos. The moment I pushed open those courtroom doors, time stopped. Every head turned. My mother's lips parted in horror. My father's eyes widened. And my brother, my own flesh and blood, screamed my name like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. 3 months ago, I was supposed to be dead, buried, forgotten, erased by the very people who called themselves my family. They held a funeral, cried crocodile tears, then signed contracts worth millions over the ashes of my name. But I didn't die. I clawed my way back from that wooden coffin, from the dirt they used to hide their sins. And now, standing before the judge, clutching the folder that would shatter their empire, I felt no fear, only justice burning in my veins. When I handed the file across the bench, the world exploded into chaos. I used to believe that truth could save people. That was before I learned my family's kind of truth came with blood on it. When I stepped into that courtroom, every memory of what they did to me came crashing back, the suffocating dark, the taste of dirt, the echo of shovels. They buried me like a secret, and I had become their biggest one. 3 months earlier, the world had mourned the tragic disappearance of Emma Wallace, daughter of construction magnate Richard Wallace, CEO of Wallace Engineering Group. My face had been on the news. The company's official statement called me an irreplaceable loss. I remember watching that broadcast from a cracked motel television, bandages still wrapped around my wrists, and laughing until I cried. They declared me dead. My father even stood before cameras, eyes glistening with fake grief, saying, "My daughter believed too much in ideals that don't fit the real world. He would like to be a presenter so that we can get the seating." He was right about one thing: I believed in honesty, and that's what almost killed me. When I vanished, they thought the problem was gone. The whistleblower had been silenced, the press had moved on, projects resumed, stock prices recovered. They never imagined I'd crawl out of that grave, but I did. The first month after escaping, I moved between cheap hotels under fake names. I avoided cameras, crowds, and mirrors. My reflection terrified me, pale, haunted, with eyes that didn't belong to the woman I used to be. Yet every night when I closed my eyes, I heard my brother's voice. "You shouldn't have looked into it, Emma. You should have stayed quiet." His words before the darkness hit me. I couldn't erase them. Those 3 months became my rebirth, the death of who I was and the making of who I had to become. I spent them collecting scraps of information, tracing old emails, bank statements, and project files I had once helped design. Everything I found led back to the same truth. My father and brother had replaced quality materials with cheap ones, bribed inspectors, and falsified reports for millions in profit. When I confronted them, they didn't argue. They eliminated me. But you can't bury a conscience forever, so I planned my return like an architect designing a building. Every move measured, every corner reinforced. I studied court schedules, watched from afar as victims sued Wallace Engineering for the damage their fraudulent constructions caused. I waited for this trial, the perfect moment when their empire looked untouchable again. And then I walked in alive. That was the day I stopped being their daughter. That was the day Emma Wallace became the ghost that would haunt them until the truth burned everything they'd built. It happened on a Thursday evening. The kind of gray, restless dusk that smelled like rain and unfinished lies. I was still at the Wallace Engineering headquarters, hunched over my desk, reviewing the latest inspection reports for the Riverside Overpass project. Something didn't add up. The concrete density was lower than the approved standard, and the safety certifications had identical timestamps forged. I'd confronted my father about it that morning, and he'd brushed me off with that cold, patronizing tone that always made me feel like a child. "Emma," he'd said, adjusting his gold cuff links, "you're an engineer, not a crusader. You don't understand how real business works." But I did. I understood too well. Real business, his kind, was built on cutting corners and burying bodies under concrete. I was about to shut down my computer when my phone rang. Liam's name flashed on the screen. "Emma," he sounded breathless, panicked. "There's been an accident at the northern site. The foundation's collapsing." Dad's furious. He said, "Only you can fix this. Please hurry." Even after all the arguments, all the shouting, I still believed him. He was my little brother, the one who used to chase fireflies with me behind Mom's garden. I grabbed my jacket and the technical plans, thinking only of preventing another disaster. Rain had begun to fall by the time I reached the outskirts of the city. The road curved through empty industrial lots and dark trees. The sight should have been bright with floodlights and workers, but it was silent. Too silent. I parked, stepped out, flashlight in hand. The ground was slick with mud. "Liam," I called. My voice echoed against the hollow steel beams. "Nothing, just wind." Then a crunch behind me, footsteps. I turned, heart pounding. "Liam, is that you?" A shadow moved. Something heavy struck the back of my head. Pain exploded. The world spun and everything went black. When I woke, my mouth was taped, wrists and ankles bound tight with coarse rope. I was lying on wood, narrow, confining, reeking oil and earth. Panic flooded me. I kicked, screamed, but the sound died against the tape. Then I heard the rhythmic thud of shovels, dirt hitting wood. They were burying me. The air grew thin. My lungs burned. I tried to scream my brother's name, Liam, but it came out as muffled gasps. The weight of soil pressed down harder with every second. Tears soaked the duct tape, the sound of my heartbeat pounding louder than the shovels. And then, just before everything went dark, I heard his voice. "Make sure it's deep enough. No one ever finds her." That was Liam, my brother. That was the moment I stopped believing in family. When consciousness crawled back, it came in fragments. The crackle of firewood, the smell of pine smoke, and the sting of bandages around my wrists. I was alive somehow. A voice murmured near me, low and rough like gravel. "Easy, kid. You're safe now." I blinked against the dim light and saw a man sitting by a flickering stove, gray hair, weathered hands, eyes as sharp as a hunter's. He wore a thick wool sweater and boots caked with mud. "My name's Ethan Graves," he said softly. "Found you half buried in the woods near the northern site. You were barely breathing. I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw. He handed me a metal cup of water. "Don't talk. Drink." The liquid burned going down, but it was the sweetest thing I'd ever tasted. "How did you know I was there?" I finally whispered. Ethan poked the fire with a stick, his face illuminated by the glow. "I'm a retired forest ranger. I patrol the area sometimes." That night, I saw headlights and heard engines when no trucks were supposed to be there. I thought of poachers, maybe illegal logging. Then they left and I heard knocking from underground. He looked at me for a long moment, so I dug. I pressed my hands to my face, shaking. The memory hit me all at once. The shovels, the dirt, the voice, my brother's voice. "Did you see them?" I asked. Ethan nodded slowly. 4 men, 3 laborers, one in a suit who just stood there smoking. He didn't get his hands dirty, but he gave orders. My stomach turned cold. That was Liam. For the next few days, Ethan took care of me. He lived in a small cabin hidden deep in the forest. Just him, an old hound, and shelves filled with hunting trophies and worn books. He didn't ask too many questions, but I could feel his curiosity. On the 3rd night, I told him everything. When I finished, he sighed and leaned back in his chair. "You've seen the devil up close, Emma, but you've still got a choice. Hide from it or drag it into the light." I stared at the bandages on my hands. I can't hide anymore. Ethan gave me something before I left, a small black digital recorder. "Old but reliable. Keep this," he said. "Truth is useless unless you can prove it." As dawn broke, mist curled between the trees. I stepped out of his cabin wearing his spare jacket and boots that were too big. My body still ached, but my heart had hardened. I looked back once. Ethan stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You're going to war, kid?" I managed a faint smile. "No," I said, "I'm going home." When I returned to the city, it no longer felt like home. The skyline that once symbolized my family's success now looked like a monument to deceit. Every steel beam, every glass window in those towers had been bought with silence, and blood mine included. I rented a small, windowless apartment above a mechanic shop in the industrial district. The smell of oil and dust clung to everything. It was perfectly anonymous, invisible. I dyed my hair black, cut it short, wore oversized hoodies, and hid behind thick glasses. The woman in the mirror wasn't Emma Wallace anymore. She was a ghost built from fury. For the first week, I barely left the room. My head still ached from the wound, and nightmares came every night. I'd wake up gasping, clawing at invisible dirt, but fear soon turned into focus. I had Ethan's recorder, my laptop, and an old flash drive I'd taken from my office before everything went wrong. That was enough to start. Days blurred into nights as I pieced together the puzzle. I traced project budgets, compared invoices, and discovered fake subcontractors, shell companies created under my brother's name. Each document screamed corruption. Every missing dollar was a coffin built for someone else. But I needed proof that tied them to me to my death. So, I followed Liam. He hadn't changed much, still drove his silver Tesla, still wore those smug designer suits, still carried himself like the world belonged to him. I tailed him from afar through the reflection of shop windows, through crowds at coffee shops, through the tinted glass of his office building. He had a routine. Morning gym, lunch at a rooftop bar, then late-night meetings he didn't want anyone to see. One evening, he slipped into a dim bar called the Copper Fox, a place where businessmen went to make their sins disappear in expensive whiskey. I sat 2 booths away, pretending to type on my laptop while my phone recorded. Liam met a tall man with a scar across his cheek and oil-stained hands. The man leaned forward. "The job's done. No one's going to find her." Liam's voice was low, almost casual. "Good, take the rest and keep quiet." He pushed a thick envelope across the table. The man smirked. "You Wallace is sure to clean up your messes quickly." I nearly dropped my phone. My stomach twisted as if I were reliving that night all over again. Liam had paid for my grave, my own brother. When they left, I sat frozen until the bartender asked if I was okay. I just smiled weakly, slipped out the back door, and walked into the cold air. That night, I replayed the recording over and over. His voice was clear as day. "Good. Take the rest and keep quiet." The ghost in me stopped trembling. She started planning. I waited a week before reaching out to her. I wasn't sure if she'd believe me or worse, if she'd tell them I was alive, but the loneliness was eating me from the inside. I needed to see her to remember that someone in that cursed house might still have a soul. I used a public pay phone near the bus station. The line rang 3 times, then her voice, soft, tired, trembling, answered. "Hello, Mom," I whispered. "It's me." Silence, then a sharp breath. "Emma," she said, barely audible. No, that's not possible. "It's me, Mom, I'm alive, don't say my name, just listen." Her sobs filled the line. Oh God, I knew it. I knew something was wrong. "They said you died in an accident, but I never believed it." We agreed to meet the next day, the old park by the lake, the one with the broken swing where she used to take Liam and me as kids. It was drizzling when I arrived. I wore a black coat, hood up, heart pounding like a drum. When she appeared, I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair, once golden, was now silver. Her face carried the kind of grief that doesn't age you. It hollows you out. "Mom," I said, stepping from the shadows. She froze, eyes wide, hand over her mouth. "Emma," she whispered as tears streamed down her cheeks. "My baby," she ran to me, trembling, and I caught her in my arms. For a moment, we just stood there crying in the rain like 2 broken souls who'd finally found each other again. "I tried to tell them," she said, her voice shaking. "Your father, he told me it was an accident." But the way he avoided the topic, the way Liam wouldn't look at me, I knew. I told her everything. How Liam had called me that night, how I'd woken in a coffin, how a stranger had pulled me out. I showed her the recording on my phone. When she heard Liam's voice say, "The job's done, no one's going to find her," she covered her mouth and gasped. No, not my son." She sat on the wet bench, hands trembling. "I raised monsters," she whispered. One greedy, one obedient, and I just stood there pretending not to see. I placed my hand over hers. "You can still help me, Mom. You're the only one who can." She looked up, eyes red but burning with resolve. "What do you need?" "I need proof, files, letters, contracts, anything that ties Dad and Liam to the fraud." She nodded slowly. "I know where he keeps them, the safe in his office. He still thinks I don't remember the code." That night, she sent me a text from an unknown number. "It's done. Check the package locker at Union Street." Inside, wrapped in an old silk scarf, was a flash drive and a note written in her delicate handwriting. "Ended, Emma, and the lies for both of us." The night I opened the flash drive, my hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped it. The files inside were everything I'd hoped for and everything I feared. Emails with city officials arranging unrecorded payments. Bank transfers to ghost accounts under fake names. Project blueprints altered after government approval. And handwritten notes. My father's looping signature scrolled across the bottom. "Use cheaper materials. No one will notice. It wasn't just fraud." It was murder disguised as business. I stared at the evidence until my eyes burned. Every click of the mouse was a memory, every signature, another nail in the coffin they'd built for me. I thought of the victims of the bridge collapse, of their families who still believed it was a construction error. My father had ruined lives and buried the truth under concrete. He tried to bury me, too, but now I had the power to bury him. I couldn't go to the police. He had friends there, people who owed him favors. If I filed a report, it would vanish before morning. No, I needed the whole world watching. So I set the trap. I created an anonymous email account, one that couldn't be traced. Then I spent 3 nights drafting my message, rewriting it until every word dripped with quiet precision to the editors of the Washington Post and the New York Herald. Attached are files exposing criminal activities within Wallace Engineering Group, included evidence of financial fraud, bribery, and an attempted murder to silence a whistleblower. You'll find the truth. The rest I'll reveal soon in person. When I clicked send, my breath caught. I felt the air shift as if the city itself was holding its breath. 2 days later, it exploded. Headlines flooded the internet. Wallace Empire under investigation. Documents suggest the CEO covered up fatal project flaws. The missing daughter may be alive. I watched the chaos unfold from the corner table of a diner. Hood pulled over my face, stirring a cup of cold coffee. On the TV above the counter, my father stood before reporters, jaw clenched. "These accusations are baseless," he said, his voice steady, but his eyes frantic. "Our company is built on integrity." Liam stood behind him, pale and sleepless. My burner phone buzzed. It was a message from Mom. "He's furious. Liam's breaking. They're talking about going back to the site to make sure you're really gone." My pulse quickened. It was happening. I replied with only 2 words. "Let them." That night I packed my camera, Ethan's recorder, and a flashlight. The drive back to the forest was silent, except for the rain hammering the windshield. The same road, the same trees, the same dirt that once tried to swallow me whole. But this time, I wasn't the one being buried. This time, I was the one waiting. The forest was silent that night, the kind of silence that feels alive, breathing with the ghosts of what it has seen. I parked the old pickup truck a mile from the site and continued on foot, my boots sinking into damp soil. The air smelled of rain and rot. My flashlight cut through the mist in thin, trembling beams. Every step felt heavier, slower. This was where I had died once. The trees seemed to lean closer, whispering the memory of my screams back to me. I crouched behind a fallen log and waited. Minutes stretched, then headlights. A black truck crawled down the dirt path, tires hissing in the mud. It stopped a few yards from the clearing where they had buried me. 4 figures climbed out. 3 were laborers, the same kind of men Liam had once hired to do the dirty work. And the 4th, my father. Even from a distance, I could recognize that proud, unshakable silhouette. Richard Wallace, still wearing an expensive suit under a raincoat like money, could protect him from the truth. Behind him stumbled Liam, flashlight shaking in his hand. His face looked thinner, haunted, as if sleep had long abandoned him. "Here," my father barked. "Start digging." The man obeyed without a word. The shovels struck the earth with hollow thuds, the sound echoing through the woods like a slow heartbeat. Each scoop of dirt sent chills down my spine. I turned on Ethan's recorder. Click. The shovels hit something solid wood. One of the men wiped sweat from his brow. "Found it, boss." "Open it," Dad ordered. The lid cracked open with a groan. The stench of wet wood and decay filled the air. The men stepped back uneasy. "It's empty," one whispered. "Silence." Liam's flashlight slipped from his hand. "No," he muttered, "that's impossible." My father leaned forward, his voice sharp, low, deadly. "What do you mean empty? I swear, sir. We buried her right here." Dad's fist slammed into the man's face. "Do you think I'm a fool?" He turned to Liam, his voice rising, cracking through the rain. "You said she was dead." Liam's lips trembled. I saw it. I saw her stop breathing. He stopped, eyes darting toward the trees, his gaze locked on me. For a moment, everything froze. The world seemed to hold its breath. "Dad," he whispered, his voice breaking. "She's here." My father turned. His eyes met mine, the same cold blue eyes I'd once inherited but no longer recognized. For the first time, I saw fear in them. I stepped out from the shadows, camera recording, rain glistening on my hood. "Hello, Dad," I said quietly. He staggered back. Emma, the men dropped their shovels. Liam's knees buckled. You buried me, I said. You made sure there was no trace left, but here I am, Emma. Dad's voice softened, trying to regain control. You don't understand. It was an accident. You an accident, I snapped. You ordered them to dig my grave. You called my death a solution. Liam was shaking. I didn't mean to, Dad said. I just wanted to fix things by killing your sister. I shouted. You called me crying the night of the bridge collapse. You said we had to tell the truth. What happened to that, Liam? He broke then, completely dropping to the ground, hands in his hair, sobbing. I thought you were dead, I thought. You made me dead, I screamed. The camera's red light blinked steadily. Every word, every confession caught in the rain-soaked night. Dad's mask finally cracked. Do you think this changes anything? He growled, stepping closer. I built this company. I built everything you see. You want to destroy it over a mistake. Over some ideals you don't even understand. I didn't move. No, I want to destroy the lie you built on people's graves and on mine. He lunged forward, trying to grab the camera. I stepped back, slipping slightly in the mud. Give it to me, Emma. The men froze, not daring to interfere. Liam grabbed his father's arm, shouting, Stop it, Dad. Let go, Richard roared, shoving him aside. But Liam stumbled backward, hit the side of the truck and collapsed, crying out in pain. I pointed the camera squarely at my father. Smile for the world, Dad. This is the last time anyone calls you respectable. He froze, breathing hard, eyes darting between the lens and my face. Then slowly his shoulders dropped. He saw it in my eyes, the finality. Emma, he whispered, voice trembling now, I didn't mean to lose you. It is a cell code intermining. You already did, I said, my voice breaking. The moment you decided your empire was worth more than your family. For a long second, no one moved. Rain hissed through the trees. Then I turned off the camera, slipped it into my jacket, and stepped back. I'll see you in court, I said. The headlights flared, cutting through the mist as I walked away, their shouts fading behind me. My heart pounded, but I didn't look back because this time I wasn't the one being buried. This time I was the one holding the shovel. The courthouse was overflowing that morning. Reporters crammed shoulder to shoulder, victims holding banners, cameras flashing like lightning. The air buzzed with that heavy tension right before a storm breaks. I stood outside for a moment, watching the rain streak down the tall glass doors. My reflection stared back at me, pale, sharpied, unrecognizable. The woman in the mirror wasn't a victim anymore. She was the reckoning. When I finally stepped inside, everything stopped. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as I walked down the aisle. My heels clicked softly against the polished floor. The same sound I'd heard in nightmares, only this time it was real, deliberate. My mother was seated near the back, her hands clasped tightly, eyes wide and wet. My father sat at the defense table, jaw clenched, flanked by lawyers in expensive suits. Beside him, Liam looked like a ghost, pale, trembling, eyes rimmed red. The judge adjusted his glasses, stunned. Miss Wallace, is that really you? Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice steady. My name is Emma Wallace, and I was buried alive by the people sitting right there and very in the first. A collective gasp tore through the room. My father tried to stand, but his lawyer pulled him back. She's lying, he barked. She's delusional. I ignored him and set a thick brown folder on the judge's bench. This is everything: financial fraud, bribery records, and evidence of attempted murder. The judge's hand trembled as he opened the first page. You're saying these are authentic? They're signed, I said coldly, by him. I pointed straight at my father, then I pressed play on Ethan's recorder. Liam's voice filled the courtroom. The job's done. No one's going to find her. Gasps, murmurs, cameras flashing. And then another recording, my father's voice filled with venom. If she talks, everything collapses. Make it disappear. Mom covered her mouth to muffle a cry. Liam buried his face in his hands, shaking violently. The judge slammed his gavel. Order, order in the court. But there was no order left. Reporters shouted questions. Lawyers scrambled. I just stood there breathing, every muscle trembling, but every word cutting like a blade. I turned toward my family, if I could still call them that. 3 months ago, I said, you called me naive. Said I didn't understand real business. You were right. I didn't understand that business could mean murder. I didn't understand that greed could make a father bury his own daughter alive. My voice cracked, but I kept going. You took everything from me. My career, my future, my faith in love and blood, but you didn't take my will to fight. I survived the grave you dug for me, and now you'll face yours." Liam stood abruptly, shouting, "Stop it, please!" Tears streamed down his face. "I didn't mean to. I thought you were dead. I swear. Dad made me sit down." My father roared, slamming his fist on the table. The judge banged the gavel again. "Enough," he thundered. "Given the evidence presented, the court orders immediate suspension of civil proceedings and the opening of a criminal investigation against Richard and Liam Wallace for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted homicide." Chaos erupted. Reporters flooded the aisles. Victims applauded, crying. The guards moved forward to escort my father and brother out. Their protests drowned beneath the roar of the crowd. My father looked back at me one last time. His once commanding face was pale, defeated. "Emma," he said quietly, "you destroyed everything." "No," I replied. "You did." Liam's voice cracked as he was dragged away. I'm sorry, Emma." I didn't answer, I couldn't. When the judge finally adjourned, the sound of the gavel echoed like thunder in my chest. Final, merciless, liberating. Outside the courthouse, sunlight finally broke through the clouds. Reporters swarmed me, microphones thrust forward, but I barely heard their questions. My mother appeared beside me, her hand trembling as she reached for mine. "You did it," she whispered, tears shining in her eyes. "You came back," I nodded. "For you, for me, for everyone they hurt." We stood together on the courthouse steps as the flashbulbs erupted around us. But for the first time, I didn't flinch. Weeks later, the verdict came. Richard Wallace, life imprisonment without parole. Liam Wallace, 30 years for conspiracy and attempted murder. The Wallace empire crumbled overnight. The buildings, the projects, the reputation, all gone like dust in the wind. I moved back to the small cabin in the woods where Ethan had saved me. Sometimes I wake in the night, gasping for air, feeling the dirt again. But when I step outside and feel the wind on my face, I remember I'm still here. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about truth surviving long enough to be heard. And mine was finally heard because in that courtroom, under the harsh white lights and the roar of cameras, I stopped being the girl they buried and became the woman who made the whole world watch them fall.